My name is Bill Reed, and this is Kitty Reed, my wife. And we're going to talk about a little experience we had. I had, and she became part of it. Back in April, May, the end of May, first part of June. 4 o'clock in the morning, I got up to go to the bathroom, and I coughed. And I went to clear my throat. I got a Kleenex, and I was going to dump it in the trash, get the phlegm out of my mouth. And nothing but blood came out. And I said to myself, I've got a problem, because I'm an AFib and I'm on blood thinner, and I've been told by my physician that I could bleed to death in 3 minutes if I had a major problem with a vein. So I called Kitty and I said, Kitty, we got a problem. Get up and take me to the hospital. And then I changed my mind and I said, no, call 911 because you're not in any condition to go. So she called 911. The fire engine showed up. I said, we don't have a fire, but the meds were on there, so they took care of me until the ambulance got here. I walked out in the driveway, got in the ambulance, and then they paid me down and took me to the hospital. Got in the hospital and they didn't know what to do with me. They didn't stop the bleeding either. I was still bleeding. At 8 o'clock, they put me in a room, and 2 times I bled, and that was it. It stopped on its own, and they did not have the idea of what was wrong with me. I didn't know what was wrong with me. So then, from then on, I had a nervous wife that was asking questions that I couldn't answer, so we went from there.
And the amazing thing about it was that how calm he was. But the nurses would come in, and the doctor even said, why are you still here? You're not sick. There's nothing wrong with you. I mean, nothing. But they wouldn't let him go home because they were concerned the bleeding would start again. So when the ENT specialist came in, and he said, well, we just need to find out why you were bleeding, Mr. Reed. So we're gonna put a scope down your throat. It was there in the room, and see if they could, see what was going on. Well, they discovered the tumor. And then they said, okay, well, we need to do a biopsy. And on Friday, they did the biopsy, and it came back cancer, which changed our lives. We had no idea what to expect. You hear about other people having cancer, but when it hits you, it's a whole lot different.
Well, I think, I went in the hospital on a Tuesday. This was on a Friday that they found out what it was. I was in there all that time. They wouldn't even let me go in. They waited until Saturday, and they let me go home. After they did the biopsy, after they did that and found out what it was, they let me go home and make the arrangements to get some treatment, which I did. And luckily, I didn't need what was the treatment?
Chemo.
The chemo,
They decided that he didn't need the chemo, that they were, they were going to start off with the radiation. And we were really torn between going to Moffitt and going to the Florida Cancer Center here in our area, because we had heard so much about Moffitt. So I told the Lord, I said, Lord, when we go to these specialists, if Bill likes those doctors, then it will be assigned to us that he's comfortable enough to go here instead of going all the way to Tampa, over an hour's drive. And he was looking at treatments 5 days a week for 7 weeks. And that wasn't including any extra time that they needed us to be there. He was always so positive. The nurses, everybody made the same statement. You come in here, you're not complaining, you're not griping. And we would sit there waiting for him to go back, and you would see people coming out. They would be complaining and mad because they had to wait, but they didn't see any of that with Bill. And it made an impression on them. Even when after he started these radiation treatments, it was hell. It was absolutely hell. It was hell on him, and it was hell on me, because I had to watch him go through all this.
My throat hurt me so bad. I had cancer of the throat, and my throat hurt me so bad I couldn't swallow. Water was the only thing I could swallow. and she had to feed me with they put a feeding tube in me, and she had to feed me with a bottle into this tube. And then I started losing weight.
4 times a day it was there, but even the nurses, when he went in to have that feeding tube put in, they made the same statement. She said to me, she said, Mrs. Reed, thank you for sharing your husband with me, to us today. And here he's having the feeding tube in, and yet they're saying to us, thank you. But while he was going through this, I had no idea. He would tell me, but I had no idea what they were doing in that back room, because it was radiation, and once that door was closed, there was nobody back there, nobody to see. But I want to show you what they did. This is the mask. They bolted, they molded it to his face, and then they put him on this table, and they bolted him to that table with these screws. Now, imagine being bolted to a table and the radiation, they didn't want him to move, and you can see the X's here where it was targeted, because they only wanted to try and destroy the tumor, not the other things. But in the process, and when they showed me this, I was panic stricken. I had no idea that it would look like that. And when they brought me in before they started his treatment and showed me what it was going to be like. But through it all, the peace that God gave him, that
Okay.
I didn't. I trusted God to take care of it, but you realize he's 91 years old. And having lost one husband already, it's hard to think about these things. But he just kept assuring me, Kitty, I'm going to be okay. Nothing's going to happen. You're going to be stuck with me. So, but it's an experience, and it draws you closer to the Lord. It makes you stronger, and it makes you realize you're more aware of your mortality than you've ever been. But God just saw us through. But as I said, the strength that he gave this man was unbelievable. Especially at our age, the radiation destroyed his taste buds. He can't taste anything at all. If he doesn't see what he's eating, there's no taste at all to what he's doing. And he's lost his voice, a lot of it. We don't know if it will come back or not. They've told us it could, maybe in a year or 2, maybe 6 months, maybe never. But that's okay, because he's back and he's whole and he's well.
I'm not tasting foods anymore either. I have to eat to live. And that's the only reason I eat right now, because I'm never hungry. I don't know if I'm full or empty. But it's going to heal. I'm going to beat it. And I've already beat it. So
within 6 months, when they did that last scope, that tumor was gone. In 6 months. Now, that's unheard of. But my God was in control.
It is Miracle Sunday. Excited to be with you. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my story. Christmas Day 2020 was a day I'll always remember. I woke up feeling awful. It was Jesus' birthday. I did not want to celebrate whatsoever. I was happy for him, but I was not happy for me. And so I was feeling the weight of just what is happening to me right now. And I took my temperature, I had a fever. I didn't feel well. I ended up going home and just sleeping. 3 days later, of course, ended up getting a COVID test, came back negative. I thought I had a bad flu and I was gonna get past not getting COVID, but the symptoms did not subside. 8 straight days I had a fever. I ended up passing out in the shower on the 8th day. My wife called EMS, they came and got me, gave me some fluids, hooked me up to oxygen, took me to the hospital. My oxygen was just diving. I was having a hard time breathing. They told me I was tachycardic. I had double pneumonia, and I had an infection. And so they told me they were gonna have to admit me and I would have to stay overnight. And of course, I tested positive for COVID, and they hooked me up to IVs and they gave me medicine. And I felt like that night that the cords of death were strangling me and that there was no way I was getting out of this. If it wasn't for Jesus and his intervention, I don't know where I'd be. Because the will to continue to fight wasn't as strong as it should be, because your body and your mental state isn't where it needed to be. But he intervened, and I know people were praying, and one day was all it took. The charge nurse said he probably would have to stay in 7 days, but it only took one day. The next day I woke up and I said, I am not staying in this hospital one more day. And I started working out on the floor. I started doing what I could. Those of you know, I'm an avid fitness person. I work out. I was hooked up to, I had oxygen in my nose, I had IVs, and I was working out. The doctors came in, they said, hey, what are you doing? And I said, I'm working out. I'm not staying here any longer than I had to. The room was small. I couldn't take a shower. I'm like, I'm going home. And so they said, if you could do this at home with medicine, would you do it? I said, absolutely. They said, you got it. And so they gave me my medicine. They said, go home. You can call your wife. Misty was shocked when she came and got me. I looked like death. I felt like death. But that night, I'll always remember in the hospital how God intervened and I believe saved my life as he continued to, just by his grace, give me the strength that I needed to keep going. And so to know that he loved me and that he had a plan for my life and that I was going to make it. And I'm here today because of him, only because of him. Here we are a year later, and I'm better than ever. I feel better than ever. Sometimes miracles are instantaneous. Other times they take time, and it's a process. But in this process, I've learned a lot about God, a lot about who I am, about my body, and how resilient we could be. Because the same spirit that raised Christ from the dead dwells in you.
I'm Pam, Malia's sister. The last year and a half has been true hell for me. I've struggled with addiction at old age. My mother kept us from it, so I never knew what certain drugs were until I met my son's father. And he introduced me to them. But it was my choice to stay on them. And for the last year and 2 months, into the beginning of this year, and when I finally got clean, it was hard. Battling mental illness, trying to raise my son, fighting with my son's father, the mental abuse, the emotional abuse, until I finally got clean and got a hold of my sister this year, and she and I talked, and I asked her I broke free from him, first of all, because he left me pretty much for dead in my apartment. But getting a hold of my sister and asking her to please take my son for the weekend, and went from taking him to the weekend to taking temporary custody of him, because I knew mentally I was broken so bad. Not even heartbroken, because at that point I couldn't even look at him without a disgust on my face because of how bad he had broken me. And she took RJ in without a doubt this time, because I've tried before and she knew it wasn't the right timing for her. And she took my son in, and I went into, she Baker acted me 2 weeks into a behavioral unit where I started back on medications. And from there, my family started helping me find treatment centers. And by the glory of God, they found a place called Rockland Treatment Center. And in that center, the 3.5 weeks I was in there, I battled my past with everything that happened to me, but I also let go of my past and all the burdens and set myself free, and I found God. I let him back into my life because I blamed him so much for what happened to me when I was younger, and I know it was time to heal. And I know that what my son's father is going to put me through, I will get through, because I've got Jesus behind me. I've got the Lord, and I've got the church. I've got my family. I've got everybody back behind me in this. And I continue to walk in His grace and follow His words and what He needs me to do to continue to be not only a better me, but a better mother to my son and mend the relationship with my daughter. Just ask Him what, why, just anything. Just keep pursuing. Just keep going. Don't stop, because once you stop, you're gonna get stuck. And you're gonna revert backwards. And there was moments we're in October, I've been clean 6 months, 7 months, and there are times where I'm like, okay, so where I'm gonna keep going, or will I revert backwards? Especially at the beginning, when I first got out, I was like, I didn't know what to do. What was gonna lie ahead of me, because my son's father still had my son, and all I wanted to do was see my son, and he refused to, and it was a whole process. And I could have easily, in 2 steps, just reverted back, but because I knew what I needed to get myself better and to get my son, I couldn't revert back to those ways.
At the end of 2015, after a huge breakup with the kid's dad, and in that moment I just knew God was like, it's time, you know. So immediately, even if I was still staying in the house with him for 6 months, I stayed there. But I started going back to church and got a job, and faithfully just started paying tithes immediately when I started working. And my tithe was $22, $28 a week, but I faithfully paid that. In 4 months, I worked at Little Greek, and then I just put it out on Facebook looking for work, and somebody guided me to Transamerica, and I was hired 2015 in December. I started January 4th of 2016, making $12 an hour, full-time benefits. And at that moment, I transitioned from his house into a new house that I was renting from my cousin, his cousin and his wife, but they let me stay there. And it was sometimes where I didn't pay the rent or I was late, but they allowed me to live there. And I stayed there for, over a year. But through that time, I was just working faithfully and paying my tithes faithfully. But there was a moment at the end of that year, towards the end of the year, maybe around August, where I just felt like I didn't have enough. And I didn't pay my tithes for like a month, but I felt it. And immediately I was back into paying my tithes because I knew that God wanted me to be faithful with His money. And when I realized it's His money and not mine, I had to just keep giving it back to Him. I was doing life insurance customer service, and an opportunity came up to be a life insurance agent and to move over into a different department. And the policy is that you can't even apply or interview for a position until your 1 year mark. But God is good, because I was able to interview for that position at 9 months in, and I was hired in January. Actually, I started at a new position. I was hired and I started January 3rd. So not even before my year mark, I was already in a new position, making more money and just selling life insurance and just still learning new things. So in that time, I was doing good because I was able to be at home, be with the kids, but then the kids also was about to pull my hair out because I'm trying to homeschool and work with them. But then it also revealed things, and things started to show up because now Jero is dealing with panic attacks, and now he wants to be isolated. And so it was really a test to me and in my faith on what God was doing in me and through my kids, because even though we were at home, there were still things that were coming up that I had to deal with now, because now my son, who is 10 years old, is having panic attacks, and I just knew it was in my heart, it was just time to buy my house. And I just started in the motion. I shared the news with everybody that I was gonna, start doing that. And then God just started opening doors, and I was saving and Whew, man, because he's so good. Because I just started in May of 2020 in the peak of it, just looking, and I've probably seen, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 houses, and the one I'm standing in now was probably the first one or two that I walked through, and at the time I couldn't afford it, and by the time the process was over, I was back to this house again. And in the moment, my mom was like, hey, this house is available, you should check it out. She didn't even know that I looked at it, but she's like, they just dropped the price, you should go check it out, it looks really nice. And when I seen it, and I just knew in my heart that this was my house. So without even having to schedule a walkthrough again, I just told my realtor, my friend, I was like, hey, put an offer in. And in that moment, it was it. And ever since then, I'm here. You gotta stay in the process. You gotta be in the deep, and he wants you in the deep, and he's gonna be there for you in the deep. And in order for you to come to cross over, you have to go through the deep first. And I just say, just stick with it. It's hard. You know, I have my bad days. I have my days where I just wanna cry, I just wanna give up. But you just have to fight, and I'm a fighter, and I'm just gonna keep fighting for what I want, and not even for what I want, but for God's glory and for his kingdom. And that's my family, my kids, my church, my peoples, you know, my community.
It all started in my lunchroom where my mom said that she would pick me up at 12:10 early for some reason, and there was no time, so I didn't know if she was late or not. So that's what kind of started my PANDAS. I first had PANDAS, that's pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with strep. I felt like I couldn't do cheer, and every time I was getting ready to walk down the mat, I cried because I didn't want to do it. And at school, I wanted to get picked up to home every day, and I felt like my hands were shaking, and I couldn't write or do math, and I felt like I was gonna throw up every day, and I ran out of line at cheer 2 times, and my legs felt like jello, and I had headaches and stomach aches every day. I had to go to the hospital, and I had to get 1 EKG, 2 blood draws, and what else did I get? I got a shot. I felt like I was gonna get kicked out of school for how many days I missed in 1st grade, cause almost every day in that year I went home early for like a month straight. 1 month straight. I went to Miss Maria. She gave me a card that said, I am loved, I am safe, Mommy and Daddy will be back, and Mommy and Dad will be back. So that helped me, and then I didn't feel scared at cheer this year, and now I didn't feel scared at school, and I didn't have to go home early anymore. Cheer last year was horror because I didn't trust my coaches or anyone on my team. So that made me feel like that was not a safe place for me to be. Cheer this year was way better than last year. I wasn't afraid at competition, didn't cry once. I was not anxious when I hit the mat. This year I was able to do harder stunts and not cry about it. And I just felt better this year for some reason. And I got Princess this year, and I got Miss Spirit, and I got to ride in the Jeep on the field, and we won 1st place at our last competition. If you feel like he's not gonna heal you and you like feel like he's not working at all. He is. He's just like easing into it.